With baseball season officially over, it's the perfect time to look at every team. And that's exactly what I'm going to be doing today. I'm going to be grading every team's 2022 season. As for the grades, I'm going to be basing them off of each team's preseason expectations. So with that in mind, let's get right into the video. Getting things started off with the Baltimore Orioles, I'm giving them an A+. Coming into the season, they were again expected to be one of baseball's worst teams. But that wasn't the case, as they surprised everyone and won 83 games and were a pretty competitive team in a very good division. Next up, I have the New York Yankees, who I'm giving a B. The Yankees always have sky-high expectations, and they played pretty well this year, winning 99 games. They made it to the ALCS, but unfortunately lost to the powerhouse Astros, so you really can't blame them all too much, but it was a good season for the Yankees. Moving on to the Boston Red Sox, I'm giving them a D. After coming a few wins shy of the World Series in 2021, if you told Red Sox fans that they were going to win 78 games this season, they wouldn't believe you. What could go wrong did go wrong for the Red Sox, and they're one of the most disappointing teams of 2022. Getting on to the Tampa Bay Rays, I'm giving them a C+. The Rays did win 86 games this year, but it was just another season in which they fell short. If you're a Rays fan, you have to be pretty disappointed. It looks like their window is starting to close, and they didn't get a ring out of it. Moving on to the Toronto Blue Jays, I'm giving them a C. Yes, they were competitive. Yes, they won 90+ games, but coming into the season, they were a lot of people's World Series pick. They were solid all season long, but after losing in the wildcard round to the Mariners, who hadn't made the playoffs in 20+ years, it was a big disappointment. Getting on to the Chicago White Sox, I'm giving them an F. They were heavy favorites coming into the season to win their division, and not only did they fail to do that, they also failed to make the postseason. They won 81 games in a season that was highly anticipated for White Sox fans. They were expected to make a deep postseason run, and that just didn't happen. Next up, I have the Kansas City Royals, who I'm giving a C. They weren't a good team all year, as they nearly lost 100 games, but coming into the season, they weren't expected to do much. Bobby Witt Jr. had a really good offensive rookie season, and Brady Singer broke out, and for Royals fans, that's really all you could expect and then some. I just couldn't grade them higher than a C because, like I said, they nearly lost 100 games. Moving on to the Detroit Tigers, I'm giving them an F. Preseason, the Tigers were expected to be relatively competitive in the AL Central, but that wasn't the case, as they won 66 games and all around they were just disappointing. There really wasn't too much bright spots on this team. Getting on to the Minnesota Twins, I'm giving them a C. This past offseason, the Twins were one of the most active teams in baseball, as they signed many free agents, including Carlos Correa. So they were expected to compete for the AL Central crown, and that wasn't the case, as they won 78 games and were below 500. Getting on to the Cleveland Guardians, I'm giving them an A. Being the youngest team in baseball, the Guardians weren't expected to be too great this year. But they won 92 games and won their division, and were only one win away from the ALCS. Everything went right for the Guardians this year. They have a very bright future, and they're going to be very good for a very long time. Moving on to the Houston Astros, I'm giving them an A+. The Astros deserve this grade. They're the best team in baseball. They just won the World Series, and they were a powerhouse all year long. Top to bottom, they are loaded. They have no weaknesses, and they lived up to their lofty expectations. Getting on to the Seattle Mariners, I'm giving them an A. Making the postseason for the first time in 20+ years is going to get you a very good grade. The only reason why I don't give them an A+ is because they had a couple games within reach against the Astros where I think they really could have won and potentially moved on to the ALCS, but nonetheless, it was a great season for Seattle. Moving on to the Oakland A's, I'm giving them a C. This is a tough one because they lost over 100 games, but they weren't expected to do much anyways. So I think the grade of a C perfectly fits them because they weren't expected to be good, but they were also pretty bad, so it's sort of in the middle. Getting on to the Texas Rangers, I'm giving them a C-. The Rangers made a lot of moves this offseason, so much so that they were expected to potentially be close to 500. But they only ended up winning 68 games, and at least in my opinion, that's pretty disappointing for the Texas Rangers. Getting on to the Los Angeles Angels, I'm giving them an F. The Angels did win 73 games, so you might be thinking to yourself, why am I so harsh on them? It's because they missed the playoffs yet again with Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout on their roster, so I think that's all that needs to be said. Moving on to the Atlanta Braves, I'm giving them a B+. Coming off of a World Series championship in 2021, the Braves were expected to compete yet again, and they did very good in the regular season, winning 100+ games, but in the postseason they lost to their division rival in the Philadelphia Phillies, so while it was a good season for Atlanta, it was a bit of a disappointment come postseason. Next up, I have the Philadelphia Phillies, who I'm giving an A. The Phillies shocked everyone and made it to the World Series, unfortunately losing to the Houston Astros, but I think a lot of people can say that it was a success this season for Philadelphia. The only reason why I don't give them an A+ is because they didn't win the World Series, but all around it was a big improvement for Philadelphia this year. They took a lot of strides forward. Getting on to the Miami Marlins, I'm giving them a D. Coming into the season, a lot of people were picking the Marlins to make the postseason due to their dominant starting pitching. Now, Sandy Alcantara carried his load, but not so much the rest of the rotation, as the Marlins all in all only won 69 games and were one of baseball's biggest disappointments. Next up, we have the Washington Nationals, who I'm giving a D-. The Nationals were baseball's worst team, only winning 55 games. And they were expected to be pretty bad. They didn't have too much talent outside of Juan Soto, who is no longer a National, but I don't know, I think 55 wins is definitely disappointing, even for a team that wasn't expected to be good. Next up, I have the New York Mets, who I'm giving a B. This is a tough one to grade because as much moves as the Mets did make this offseason, no one was expecting them to win 100+ games. But then they choked so hard in the postseason, but I said earlier in the video I'm basing this off of preseason expectations, so I'm giving them a B. Getting on to the Pittsburgh Pirates, I'm giving them a C. The Pirates were expected to be bad, and they were bad. So like I've done with a couple other teams, I'm giving them a C because they weren't good, but they also weren't expected to be good. Getting on to the Milwaukee Brewers, I'm giving them a B-. Brewer fans would have definitely loved to see them make the postseason this year, and while they didn't make it, they still won 86 games. They're sort of a team that's in the middle. I can't give them too low of a grade because, like I said, they won 85+ games, so I think a B- fits them well. Moving on to the St. Louis Cardinals, I'm giving them a B. The Cardinals pretty much did everything they were expected to this season. They won the division and made the playoffs. But the postseason is a different story. They lost to the Phillies in the wild card round, so that was a disappointment, but all in all, they had a pretty good season. Next up, I have the Chicago Cubs, who I'm giving a C+. The Cubs weren't expected to compete this year. In fact, I think a lot of people thought they were going to win 60-something games. But they ended up winning 74 games, which is pretty good for a team that didn't have too much talent on it. Getting on to the Cincinnati Reds, I'm giving them a C. After starting 3-20-something, it's pretty impressive to see them nearly lose less than 100 games. But preseason, I think a lot of people were predicting right around this sort of record. They ended up going 62-100, and I don't think that surprises many people. Getting on to the Arizona Diamondbacks, I'm giving them a B+. After winning 52 games in 2021, the Diamondbacks improved by 22 games this year. No, they didn't compete, but they have a very bright future, and I think they're going to be one of the few juggernauts in a couple years down the road. Next up, we have the Colorado Rockies, who I'm giving a D+. They made a couple big moves this offseason, signing Chris Bryant and a few others, so they were expected to be pretty good. But all Rockies fans know that things just aren't going to go their way, and I happen to know that myself, unfortunately, so disappointing season for the Rockies all around. Moving on to the LA Dodgers, I'm giving them a B-. They won a franchise record 111 games in the regular season. So you may be thinking, why such a low grade? Well, they choked very hard. Moving on to the Giants, I'm giving them a C-. After last year's massive overperformance, realistically the Giants were expected to take a few steps back. And they did that, but a couple more steps than I would have thought. They won 81 games, and I thought they were gonna compete for a postseason spot. I thought they were gonna come close to 90 wins, and they just didn't do that. And finally, getting on to the San Diego Padres, I'm giving them an A. After a very disappointing 2021 season, the Padres bounced back and won 89 this year. Preseason, if you told Padre fans that they would come just a few wins shy of the World Series without Fernando Tatis Jr. playing a single game this season, even they might not believe you. Alright, that's going to wrap today's video up. Let me know what you guys think down below.